All right, well, first of all, big thanks to our initial sponsor, Panasonic Ventilation, your #1 source for all your ventilation needs. They also have point source decentralized energy recovery ventilators, and they have balanced systems that connect with the furnace that are more affordable than ERVs or HRVs, that bring in just continuous fresh air through the furnace intake and through the bath fan. Make sure to check them out over at Panasonic Ventilation. And then a huge thanks to our top tier sponsor today, T-Stud. T-Stud is a simple concept, a thermally broken insulated wall stud assembly for use in exterior walls and party walls. Made right in Minnesota, the T-Stud is a new building product that uses 2-machine stress-rated MSR or #2 lumber members as an internal truss system and a froth-in-place closed-cell foam. These extremely straight uniform studs make square construction a breeze. Conventional 2x6 lumber needs a 5 to 12% call rate to avoid being bowed, warped, cut boards. Using T-Stud, the call rate is virtually 0. Based on some initial testing, a 4 to 7 point drop in the HERS index rating and energy efficiency over your standard 2x6 wall construction without it, nearly as efficient as continuous insulation for an estimated 1/4 of the cost. The T-Stud wall assemblies come with everything you can imagine that go into a standard structurally insulated wall stud assembly in comparison to normal studs. And the T-Stud has been tested by the United States Gypsum in the state-of-the-art soundproofing testing facility so that it can also reduce sound issues either from the exterior or in between interior rooms or in multifamily buildings. Providing a 90% improvement in noise control over 2x6 framing as well. Head over to www.tstud.com today to learn more. Now this particular course here is approved for 1 hour in continuing education units, GBCI, AIBD, NARI Green, BPI, NonWholeHouse, as well as AIA, Health, Welfare, and Safety, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. This session is brought to you by the GreenHome Institute. We're a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. And today I'll be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the Executive Director here. All right, so welcome to BREEAM, an introduction to BREEAM for residential construction, and especially in now in the U.S. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker here, Brianna Wheeler. She is the Director of Operations for BREEAM America upon its founding in May 2016. BREEAM America is the training, licensing, and certification body for BREEAM rating systems tailored for the U.S. market, BREEAM USA. BREEAM was the world's first green building rating system, and today is the most widely used program worldwide with over 2.2 million registered buildings and over 50, as of this, nearly 600,000 certifications. Brianna organizes and oversees the daily operations of the business, including the development and maintenance of the BREEAM USA technical standards. Prior to joining BREEAM America, Brianna worked for nearly 10 years as an internal advisor on environmental and sustainability risk management for large multinational corporations that was based in London, England. She is a member of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, a chartered environmentalist with the Society of Environment, and a lead green associate. So with that, Brianna, we're welcome to have you, and please take it away.
Thanks so much for that kind introduction. Good morning or afternoon to everybody. Thanks so much for joining today and for your interest in BREEAM Use Residential. Really excited to talk about it as it's going to be new into the U.S. market. So just a couple of things around the learning objectives. So, you know, today for the course, we're going to explore the concept of what a sustainable residential development looks like, identify some ways to inspire change from existing homeowners towards more sustainable practices, understanding some of those barriers to sustainability improvements, and understanding the role that BREEAM Use Residential can play in supporting more sustainable practices and driving value. But before we dive into the standard, let me tell you a bit about BRE, our organization. So the Building Research Establishment, we are the world's leading building science center. For 96 years, BRE has been undertaking research on the built environment and translating that research into standards like BREEAM with the aim of driving improvement in the built environment. So we have over 650 employees globally with 3 operational centers around the world, in addition to our headquarters outside of London in the UK. We're owned by the BRE Trust, which is an NGO that reinvests the profits from our businesses into research and supporting education. In addition, we also have things like innovation parks, which is the picture you can see there, where essentially we build and install new technologies, new techniques, try and break them, try and make them better. We do a lot of our own research. So BREEAM is just one of the things that we do, but it's probably something that we're best known for globally. So as Brett mentioned, BREEAM is the world's first and most widely used environmental assessment method for buildings. We are used in over 78 countries, and we're considered the trusted mark of sustainability for investors and owners around the world. We've done, as he mentioned, over 565,000 certificates issued and 2.2 million projects registered across the BREEAM programs. And underpinning that is a network of over 4,000 independent licensed assessors all over the world who apply the BREEAM standard and work with us to certify those buildings. So thinking about sustainability for residential buildings, I think the first question is to ask ourselves, what is a sustainable home? And that sort of lays the foundation for how we approach sustainability in residential. So, let's start with the inside. So a sustainable home should be light, bright, warm, and airy. A sustainable home should also have low bills. It should be energy efficient and water efficient so that consumption and costs are minimized. Moving to the outside, another important aspect is having a home that is safe and secure. And finally, it's all about location, location, location. Really walkable to most amenities needed for everyday life, or walkable to public transport options that are frequent, viable, and affordable. When looked at this way, essentially we all want what is actually a sustainable home. Well, sure, you're saying to yourself, but what do we do with existing buildings where some of these aspects are already decided or locked in? All buildings can be made nicer places to live and managed more efficiently, and all stakeholders, owners, investors, and residents can benefit. Essentially, all buildings in existence have a role to play if we're to stop the worst case outcomes of climate change from occurring. And even if all we do is move the poorly performing buildings to average, the outcome of this could have a huge impact on both people and our planet. So BRE have been running a stakeholder engagement to develop the BREEAM in Use program for residential. And we've noted that there are some key barriers to improving sustainability performance. The first is a lack of data. Performance data is linked to bill payers, but the performance is influenced by more than consumption. Information about the building or its systems go missing as properties change hands, and this information is important to maintain or improve performance, and it can be really costly to reproduce. The second thing we found were struggles to engage homeowners. The home is the castle, particularly where residents are paying their own bills, and there are clear boundaries on what owners and managers can do. It can be really hard to build a community approach that doesn't feel like rule enforcement, as opposed to a community effort or working together to make a community more sustainable. The third thing we found in this process were misaligned incentives. Where residents are paying for their own electricity bills in particular, there didn't seem to be the economic push by owners or managers to invest in system improvements that would lower those costs. How were owners or managers to recoup the costs of that investment? They couldn't necessarily raise the rent, and indeed doing so could cause other problems. So all that being said, the sustainability of the property is being scrutinized closer, and owners or managers are being judged on the consumption habits of their residents. So inspiring change is going to be really important if we want to move these properties forward, and that requires everybody to work together. So owners, managers, and residents have to work together to make a property more sustainable. It can't just rest on the shoulders of one group to drive it forward. Multifamily properties in particular aren't just a collection of homes, but a community of people who are sharing systems and infrastructure to provide a safe, secure, and healthy environment to live in. So the first thing to inspire change is about empowering the residents. Providing information is absolutely crucial, but engaging residents in an ongoing dialogue is a really big part of it. And that can mean things like asking for feedback and actually feeding back what's going to be done about that, acting on it, but also breaking down sustainability into simple terms is really important. The second thing is setting clear goals and providing a clear structure to deliver on those goals. Now, this may be something as simple such as reducing energy use in the amenity areas, I don't know, by 10% over a 3-month period, for example. The next step is then to inform them how they can deliver on that reduction. Third is providing clear rewards in which everyone shares. Taking these goals and translating them into the rewards everyone can understand will incentivize residents to share the responsibility because they will also be rewarded. Communicating performance makes clear where residents are benefiting from the sustainability efforts. The details aren't as important, but showing that ownership and management practices are being assessed and the performance certified in particular can give assurance to tenants that they are benefiting too. So green rating systems provide a framework to compare a building's performance to a standard of performance, which essentially defines what good looks like. So the journey towards sustainability may involve many steps. Buildings are going to have constraints, whether physical or economic or both, and those will present barriers to moving forward. A good green rating system provides the flexibility to encourage buildings to look at what they can do and put their efforts towards those today and look at overcoming those barriers to move forward in the future. A system also has to cover a wide range of locations and incorporate many different building management practices to allow for meaningful comparison and assessment. Sustainability in homes means that residents' health and well-being, environmental performance, and economic performance are all considered in business decisions. A good green rating system includes incentives to meet all of those objectives in a balanced way. And finally, a green rating system should be simple to understand and use. Sustainability needs to be for all of us, and it shouldn't require specialists just to understand the detail. It's with these principles that BREEAM in Use Residential has been developed. As with all BREEAM rating systems, BREEAM seeks to help clients find a balance between minimizing environmental impacts, supporting and protecting occupant health and well-being, and ensuring that the asset is financially viable and creates value. BREEAM in Use Residential sees two groups of stakeholders. The first are at the community or building level. These are the investors, owners, and managers. The second is at the homes level, mortgage lenders, homeowners, and housing associations. BREEAM in Use Residential has two parts to it. So the first part is the asset performance, which assesses the physical structure of the asset. Management performance assesses how the building is managed and its operational performance. Each part is independently scored and assessed, and certification can be achieved for either or both parts. When done together, the assessment results help identify areas for improvement and whether those improvements would be on the physical structure or it could be a management change. Done together, it's a more holistic view of performance. Like BREEAM in Use for commercial properties, BREEAM in Use Residential is organized into 9 categories. For those who are familiar with other rating systems, most of these categories will be familiar. So there are a couple of categories that make BREEAM different. The first is the incorporation of health and well-being into the standard. We look at health and well-being, this approach, as a foundational approach. So it's not as in depth as rating systems that specifically focus on health and well-being. But it's a really great place to start for buildings thinking about incorporating health and well-being as part of their sustainability approach. The second thing is around energy, in that in our program, we look at both the energy efficiency of the technologies in the building and also the operational energy performance. And we believe that both of these have a key role to play, not just in understanding how energy is used in the building, but also making those improvements. Understanding whether it's a systems change that's needed to make the improvement or it's a management issue is really, really key. The third piece is around materials. And when we talk about existing buildings, we're looking at this from essentially maximizing the life cycle of the materials already in the building, using the old adage, the greenest building ever built is the one already in place. So the materials focus is really around resiliency. How are the materials in the building and the building itself and its financial value being protected? So an asset under BREEAM in Use Residential could have up to 3 scopes: the surroundings, the buildings, and the homes. Surroundings is required for all assessments. Buildings and homes would be optional for with operational control of and access to the unit by the user being a deciding factor. Where operational access to the units is limited, the units may need to be excluded from the assessment. So BREEAM in use residential requires the user to establish the scope of the control first. The user needs to decide where to place the boundary between buildings and homes, with consideration given to how many questions in the home scope that could possibly be answered. The second step is to answer the questions based on the scope, with the criteria needing to be applied to those areas. Questions may only apply to one of those aspects, for example, surroundings, but not others. Some questions will have different answers depending on which scope is included, and in some there will be those that stretch and credits can be accumulated. Participants or users are urged to consider carefully how they establish the assessment area to ensure that the applicability is correct. So BREEAM in use residential will be available for assets that have both multiple dwellings in it with all the categories that you see there, as well as individual homes. For eligibility to participate, there are a number of aspects that need to be met for that asset to be eligible. So let's start with occupancy. And when we talk about occupancy, we're obviously thinking more about, almost like a multifamily sort of dwelling. So the asset must have been stabilized for 1 year prior to the initial certification, with the potential for some flexibility in the occupancy level required for recertification. Secondly, an assessment area can just be part of a building or a single floor. So where you have a mixed-use building, say ground floor retail with apartments on top, BREEAM in use residential can be deployed just in the residential portion. In these cases, all the relevant amenity and service areas must be included. Third, the asset must comply with all relevant regulations and legislation, and that's something that the client confirms, but is not necessarily assessor verified. Energy and water consumption data for all spaces must be included in the assessment, and they have to be available for at least 1 year prior to the start. So the energy and water consumption is really, really important for that. And finally, multiple buildings are not allowed under a single assessment, except where buildings meet the criteria included here. And the reason why we do that is to ensure that the assessment does not average performance. If you think you take 2 buildings, one which is poorly performing and one which is high performing, and averaging those 2 just to get a middle of the road performance, it doesn't really describe the performance accurately. And also, you lose a huge opportunity to make improvements in those buildings. So an asset, BREEAM in use residential would continue with what we call the balanced scorecard approach, which means that each category in each part would be weighted based on the environmental impact relative to that part. So this allows users to have the flexibility to choose where they want to focus their efforts within the constraints of their property and budgets, but also ensures that only the properties that adopt a broad approach to sustainability would achieve the higher ratings in the BREEAM in use program. And what this means is essentially in each category, it's not a, 1 credit in one category is not necessarily equivalent to 1 credit in another category. The weightings help balance that out. And again, this is one of the things that we do to build flexibility into the program while maintaining the rigor. So an asset will receive an overall percentage score for each part that they pursue, and that score would then translate to a BREEAM in use rating. Assets with a score less than 10% would be uncertifiable. So the range of ratings here reflects BREEAM's commitment to encourage all buildings to understand and certify their sustainability performance. Think of it essentially as adding more rungs to the sustainability ladder to help everyone climb. And what we do is we encourage buildings to think about their performance, understanding their performance today to see where they're going tomorrow. So even buildings that would certify at the acceptable or pass range, this could be a starting point in their sustainability journey. And again, if they can move just from acceptable just to good, the impact of that, both environmentally and likely for the residents and for the operational costs, would be massive. So there's a lot of benefit to understanding. So what do those ratings mean? So BREEAM is a performance-based standard, which means that we reward outcomes rather than actions. And we're also a global standard. So what that means is that our credits are awarded for the same performance no matter where it is in the world, What that means is that all buildings can be compared. So a building that achieves a very good here in the United States is comparable to a building that receives a very good in performance-wise, is comparable to a building that receives very good, say, in, I don't know, Kazakhstan or Russia or Western Europe. So when a building, in our terms, when a building gets, say, a very good rating, that building is performing in the top 25% of buildings globally. If a building gets an excellent rating, that's the top 10% of buildings. And if an outstanding building, it's in the top 1% of buildings. And that is a true innovator. And our standards are written to ensure that outstanding really is an aspirational, and it is at the extreme top end of performance, but always, again, looking at performance. It's not comparing to a group of your peers, it's looking at building performance overall. What can we achieve? And because we're also a science-based standard, that standard of performance is set and led by the science, not consensus. So now that we've gone through structure, let's talk about the process. So BREEAM in use residential can be used in a couple of different ways. So first, it can be used to benchmark performance, just to understand where that is and mark it over time. Second, it can be used to improve that performance. So understanding, where a baseline is, seeking to understand what would be the next steps to improving that, and moving forward on it, and going through a cycle in that way. And finally, the program can be used to certify that performance. Now, certification in our program is optional, and we do that because really we want people to certify where there is value in doing so. Sometimes there isn't, but we didn't want that to be a barrier to using the program, to getting through to that to that performance improvement. So for BREEAM and for us, certification is essentially about verifying performance, regardless of the rating. Think of it like financial data. Companies get their financial data certified by a third party because it provides their stakeholders assurance of the quality of the information, not because it's good, bad, or otherwise. Sustainability performance data is no different, and that's particularly true for investors. So the process that works for this is starting, obviously, on the client side, is strategizing what would be the best value or the best outcome from this. The next step is to measure the performance of the asset. What is that looking like? Where does it come out in this process? And then the next step is to make a decision about whether certification makes sense. Now, if certification doesn't make sense and they want to just move into an improvement program, they can do that. And again, it's a sort of a cycle there where you're measuring performance, you're deciding to certify, maybe moving into improvement. Now, if the decision is undertaken to certify, the next step is to appoint that licensed assessor. And that is directly arranged between clients and assessor organizations. We don't broker that. And then the assessment process takes place. And one of the key things about BREEAM is that it requires an on-site visit for certification. Following that is the certification process in which the assessor's work undergoes a rigorous quality assurance process. So I'm going to show you how our online tool, which facilitates the benchmarking and certification process, works. During the pilot phase of BREEAM in use residential, the benchmarking aspect is going to be done in an Excel assessment tool, but ultimately the online tool that I'm going to show you will facilitate this process. So I'm just going to show you some top-level sort of pictures of how we do it in commercial that will be mirrored. So first, the client would go ahead and register their organization in the online tool, and then they'd start the measurement process. So the questions, the way the tool works is that the questions are generally a series of drop-down menus, very easy to select the answer. We keep all the detail within our technical manual, which is made available free to download by anybody on our website. And essentially, that's to keep the tool really easy to use, very clean. So the way it works is the user will select the answer option that matches their performance. They can then at that point start to upload evidence if they're looking at certification. They can also add notes to provide some context to the answer. And usually this is done where the answer is a little bit more complex, for example, around energy consumption. So in the tool, once the answer is selected, for that particular question, the tool will show you how many credits were achieved and how many credits were available for that specific question. Once the answers have been given for the questions that the user wants to answer in that whole category, they get to the bottom and they can press on the score button. And then what that shows along the bottom there on the left-hand side is the total available credits for that entire category, how many credits were achieved based on the answers provided, and then the absolute score percentage. And for each of these, the way that the questions are grouped is by category, as you can see on the far left-hand side. Now, what that does is once you press score on the first category, the scoring output starts to generate. And this is what an example of what it looks like. So in the upper left-hand corner, you have an overall percentage score and how that translates into a starred rating. You have some data about the score percentage and the weighting in a number format. But I think the most compelling piece is the bar graph, because what this is showing you is for this particular section, for this particular part, how close this building is performing to international best practice, which is the 100%. And again, it's very clear where the best practices are being held and where there's more room for improvement. Now, for some of our clients, you may get, the clients may get to the end and say, wait a minute, this doesn't match what I think is happening. Let me go back into the questions. You'd be able to go back into the questions, change the answer, rescore, and see your score in real time. Now, this is an unverified scoring output. So this is information that can only be used internally at this time. The only time it can be communicated externally, and that's to either your tenants or stakeholders, any stakeholders, it would need to be certified and go through the full certification process with a licensed assessor. Now, within our tool, for those who have portfolios of properties, we've rolled out a performance reporting capability, which essentially allows the user to look at their entire portfolio and build reports to drill down into the data. So it's not just about putting information in to get certification. It's also about being able to collate data to make business decisions. And those can be built in many different ways. So the user has the ability to drill down really as far as they want into it. So everything from the overall score, so what is the BREEAM rating that's on the outcome, all the way down into various, either by category or down to specific questions. So, for organizations who have a portfolio who are looking at maybe particular performance areas, they can use the BREEAM program actually to set those key performance indicators and then track performance across their portfolio. So assessment and certification, we mentioned about the process there. Now, the licensed assessor plays a really, really important role as an independent, a truly independent third-party assurance of this data. So our organization trains and licenses these assessors, but we don't appoint them or assign them into this work. So when our clients come to us and say, oh, we're looking for a licensed assessor, we point them to our list of licensed assessors and encourage them to reach out or work with the assessors that make sense for them. So from the, if you're looking at it from a process perspective, so from strategize to appointing the assessor, that's really on the client side. It's client driven along with maybe their consultant if they're using that. But once it moves into the assessment process, the assessor really takes the lead there. And the assessor, maintaining that independence and that third party is extremely important. So the BREEAM Use Assessors, I mentioned, the BREEAM Use Assessors essentially go through a training program with us, and they have to take an exam. Once they pass the exam, they are eligible to become licensed. And those licensed assessor organizations and the assessors themselves get to use these wonderful badges which indicate their competency. And these are the only designations that we provide at this time. So the assessment process by the assessor really is almost like a three-step. So first is a documentation review. BREEAM is really heavily evidence-based, which means that we require that primary evidence is provided to support the performance being described. So the first thing that the assessor will want to do is do a documentation review and determine what, if any, gaps exist and what's been provided if it meets the BREEAM standard. Okay, once that's done, generally that's when you move on to the on-site assessment. So the assessor would need to come out on site, they need to walk the building or the asset to do the verification work. And essentially what they're doing is confirming that what they've seen on paper is matched by what they see at the building. So the on-site assessment can be as broad as the credits that are being claimed by the client. You know, it can be very narrow scoped, or it can be much broader. And then finally, the assessor is required to put together an assessment report, which essentially confirms what credits that they have awarded based on the evidence that they have and what they've seen on site. And they have to verify that they how the compliance has been confirmed. And the assessor has the authority and indeed the duty to award or deny credits where the BREEAM standard has not been met. And the assessor won't submit for certification until they can be sure that the answer provided by the client has been backed up by that evidence and they have verified it on site. So that assessment report comes to our organization, and we do a rigorous quality assurance process on the information. And that's part of the licensing that we work with our licensed assessors to ensure that the quality of the program and the quality of the reports is really high. So typically, our program, how it works in commercial and how it should work in residential, is that clients or users have the ability to benchmark up to a year. Essentially, if they're ready to go and move into the assessment and certification process, they can do so. It really is down to how much time they need to benchmark and prepare for the assessment. If they can do it quickly, then there's no time limit. There's no performance period or anything like that. For the assessment and certification, the process is between 3 and 5 months. So for the assessor, you're looking at 4 to 8 weeks from the assessor engagement. And that, again, that depends on the accuracy of the performance measurement, the availability and quality of the evidence that's provided, and what the site visit requirements are and outcomes. From the time that they submit, the time that the assessor submits their certification report, it's 6 to 8 weeks, and that is dependent on the quality of their report. So what makes a building better when they use BREEAM? Well, for us, it's really all about building performance. So the first thing is having a holistic assessment. So for us, that means that human health is integrated with environmental performance, and also that environmental performance and financial value are also linked, okay? So the BREEAM program is all about, encouraging that balance, finding that balance between people, planet, and profit, taking that foundational approach to health and well-being, and really looking at all the different components. So looking at both the physical structure and how it's managed. The second piece is around being flexible yet rigorous. So I mentioned about, very few of the questions in our programs are mandatory. And we build in that flexibility to help buildings focus on the areas where they can improve and look to move forward from there. But it doesn't sacrifice the rigor. The certification reflects the true performance against sustainability in that holistic view. So the balanced scorecard approach means that broad approach to sustainability is needed to gain the higher ratings. And that on-site assessor provides the investor confidence that the performance claims are accurate. That's really where the rigor comes in. Now, the third piece is around speed and cost. So the process is really quick and cost effective, and both of those are really crucial where every penny counts and resources are stretched. So low cost benchmarking allows ownership and management to understand their performance and act to improve the asset portfolio value while reducing risk. And certification provides, the certification process provides a low-cost, high-value method for communicating that sustainability performance. And particularly in the multifamily environment, there is, a portfolio-level reporting group called GRES, in which GRES recognizes and provides points, additional points for properties that are third-party certified. And BREEAM is one of the recognized programs to go with that. So again, it's about being able to talk about sustainability and make sustainability accessible for all, cost is a huge barrier for many rating programs and for sustainability in total. But it can't just be about, you know, the really high value luxury apartments kind of focus. We need to have it accessible for all so that we can move forward. And then finally, transparency and being science-based is really important to us. So the full BREEAM and CEUS residential standard will be available to download for free from our website, just as the standard for commercial properties is currently. For us, as a as a building science organization, disseminating information and knowledge about the built environment and what good looks like for us is absolutely crucial. We make that free to anybody around the world. And being able to, we do have clients or organizations who use the BREEAM standards who maybe don't go through the benchmarking and certification program. And in our view, you know, if we can get that information out there and it can be used, you know, feel free. People are, you know, we're really excited for people to use the program as a framework, however they want to use it. But also having us as a science-based and a science-driven standard, that science underpins the performance levels for which we award credits. And that science really allows us to essentially drive and stretch the targets in industry to deliver those improved performance levels. Over time, we can, you know, raise the ceiling of what good looks like and also lift up the floor, all while helping drive the program forward. So one of the things that we do is our standards undergo, on average, a 3 to 4 year review cycle and potentially update. And one of the things that we do is we review the science, where has the science moved, how have best practices improved, and we seek to stretch the standard a little bit more. But we do it on this regular basis to ensure that we're incorporating all these best practices and we're moving in an incremental way, but always while moving forward. Part of our transparency is about essentially going through a public comment period. We publish our standard for public comment. The science always drives it. We are not a consensus-based organization, but we do take very seriously the comments that we receive through our public process. So with all 4 of these things, it's really important from our part to say it's all about focusing on building performance. Use BREEAM to understand how that performance is and certify where there is value in doing so. If you can't see the value or can't find the value in doing it, then that's totally fine. Use the program anyway, but it is a framework for improving performance in those buildings. Now, the BREEAM and CEUS residential program is currently in a pilot. We are working with a small group of organizations to provide stakeholder engagement. The lessons learned that I mentioned at the beginning was a big part of that. And again, it's been really interesting to hear some of the struggles that, that particularly multifamily properties have in driving sustainability, and really looking at how BREEAM and CEUS residential can shape that conversation and help drive it forward. So that's currently, we're in the drafting stages. We will be moving into the final pilot stage and opening up registrations sort of early Q1, Q2 2019. And what that means is that the manual will go public for commentary, for review, for feedback from the public, but still allowing for properties to register to participate in the program. So that program will become finalized when we, or become a formal certification program when we release the global BREEAM and CEUS update in probably 2019, and that will be for both commercial properties and residential. And once that updates, it will become a formal rating system, and the certification will be recognized formally by GRES. The great thing about opening up the pilot is that it will allow buildings to use the program, ready themselves, prepare for what the questions are, and sort of start gathering the data, provide plenty of time. And then once that program opens, literally users can engage the assessors to begin the assessment process, and it should be a very quick sort of program. So once that rolls in 2019, as with any program, you know, one of the things we're reviewing is, and through our process, is looking at whether or not this may become an independent program in 3 to 4 years. Right now, I mean, BREEAM in use is really, or BREEAM in use residential is really focused more on the investor market, you know, sort of that high level, rather than from a consumer focus. And why we thought it felt really, it sat well under BREEAM in use generally alongside our commercial program. But we're always open to looking at how are these programs driving improvement, right? So if becoming an independent program would make more sense, that's something we're open to considering, but we want to see how it develops over time. And our users' feedback is really crucial to that. So we'll be paying close attention to it as we go through. Well, I want to thank you guys for your time and your attention, and I'm open for questions now.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Brianna. Yeah, we definitely got plenty of time for questions. I know I've got several questions, and as those questions are pouring in, just real quick, a huge thanks to everyone who allows us to do what we do, our volunteers, our board of directors, all of our members, all of you for attending, and a big thanks to our top tier sponsors, Shrinergy, for both on the go, in the woods, or small business in your home, backup solar powered battery solutions, as well as full on microgrid solutions. And then, of course, the world's most energy efficient wall stud assembly, the T-Stud. You got to check them out. And then, of course, Mitsubishi, all electric heat pump systems for single family, multifamily, ducted, ductless, help you get to net zero energy today. Huge thanks to them and all of our sponsors. So yeah, Brianna, there's a lot of questions pouring in right now. One of them is about, and I don't know if this question is specific to the U.S. or not, but maybe you can answer it both ways. But how many assessors do you currently have? And then the second question is, what is the distribution of clients using BREEAM? Maybe that's, you know, I guess how many different project teams you have, if you're willing to share that or count that.
Sure. So thank you for the question. So the number of assessors that we have currently in the U.S., we have 17 assessor organizations and around 30 BREEAM in use assessors. So the focus the focus has been on the commercial market up to this point. Worth noting too that we only launched in the U.S. in October 2016. So you know, we're growing fast in that sense. And at the moment, the clients that we have commercially certainly range across a wide range of industries. One of the great things about BREEAM in use is that we accommodate almost every single space type possible. So everything from industrial and healthcare to your standard office and so on. So the clients really range widely and much further than have looked at or traditionally been catered to in the green building market before, because our standard is really looking at performance. It can suit different space types. So for BREEAM in use residential, our group of stakeholders has been limited at the moment only to multifamily, some of the bigger multifamily organizations, so Greystar, for example, Alliance Residential, Bozzuto Management. So it's a pretty broad range, and we see residential as sort of, again, just another space type to add into the BREEAM in use program, but obviously with clear notes on this, because you know, residential is a different beast than commercial, so that's why the standard is slightly different.
Well, let's keep the conversation going on the assessors, because there's a lot of questions. And the next one is, are assessors limited to certain countries, or can they work all across the globe?
Right. So the training program actually means that the person who takes it is eligible to be licensed throughout, to take out a license to cover different geographies in the world. So the USA has its own license, so that license is specific. But individuals who've taken the training are qualified to take out a license to work anywhere else. So in the UK, yep, absolutely. There are some countries who are geographically specific, like the US is. So Germany, Sweden, it's a smaller group. But we also have an international license, which would then mean that the assessor could work anywhere in the world.
To what degree can these assessors be involved in a project? Can they have any financial stake? Could they have done any design? Could they do HVAC sizing? Could they do energy modeling, water modeling? Where does the line get drawn?
Sure. So the assessor has to be an independent third party. So they're essentially awarding the rating. So what the conflict of interest has to be managed. So we don't allow the assessors to have done any consulting on the projects that they're assessing. Really, really important, because essentially it would be like them approving their own work, saying, yes, of course that meets the gold standard. We all would love to do that. But the assessor really needs to be an independent third party. Now, that doesn't preclude an assessor organization from offering both services, but we have really rigorous program in place to ensure that the conflict of interest has to be declared, that the division between the consulting services and the assessor has to be pretty rigorously enforced, and all of that has to be agreed and discussed before the assessment takes place. And that's to ensure that our organization is aware of the potential for error and problems, and we can manage that in advance.
Tell me more about the qualifications one has to have to become an assessor.
Sure. So our program requires that assessors have two years full-time work experience in the last 5 years in one of 6 sort of backgrounds. And it's essentially understanding buildings and operations systems, or having an auditing background. So something like that. So 2 years full-time in the last 5. And then once that's just eligibility to take the course. Then our course, it consists of some online foundational modules that are taken, and then a 2-day in-person classroom workshop where we essentially teach the assessors the candidates how to use the standard, how to apply it, and everything that they need to know to be a successful assessor. At the end of that 2 days, there is a proctored exam taken right after, which is open book, but it is quite rigorous and it's time bound. So it's an hour-long exam. And then once the individual passes that exam, then they are eligible to become licensed. It's not an automatic aspect, but the eligibility lasts for 12 months after the exam results are provided. So the the person who's eligible can determine which licenses they want to take.
And is there ongoing fees or ongoing continuing ed or some kind of requirement to certify a project every so often to maintain your assessor status?
So for the assessors, it's essentially requires a project, the assessor to achieve a full certification within or at least every 3 years. At the moment, we don't have any CEU requirements, in part because there's so many different aspects, but we do issue a monthly assessor newsletter and bulletin that provides operational and technical updates to help keep them up to date. We do webinars to share best practices to keep everybody, sort of fresh in mind. The assessor license is $500 per assessor per year. There's no license overall for an organization. It's just the number of assessors that are on the license itself, and so that's really the only cost at this time. That $500 per assessor per year.
Great. Now, what you said you do quality assurance on the assessors. Is that desktop only, or is there a percentage of projects where somebody actually from BRE comes and inspects the buildings as well?
So for the quality assurance, it is only a desktop at this time. We do make exceptions where clients, for example, can't provide or are unwilling to provide electronic evidence. So, for example, secure locations, banks is a good one. And in those cases, we work with the assessors and the clients to arrange for the quality assurance process to take place in a secure environment. But generally speaking, it is desktop. So the assessor provides the on-site verification, and much of the evidence that we require for submission backs up the photographic evidence. And so the quality assurance that our team does is really looking at, has the assessor done their job? Have they verified? Have they demonstrated that the compliance is there, both through the evidence and through the site visit?
So thinking about in the terms of what many of us may be familiar with, which is the lead accredited professionals, the lead APs, to what extent does BREEAM maybe offer third-party, or not third-party, I'm sorry, but non-third-party consulting credentials for those to be involved in a project who know what they're doing? Is there any kind of system in place that's kind of similar to the US GBC's AP?
There is actually, yeah. So we have something called a BREEAM AP, which we don't call it accredited professional. It's something slightly different, which is totally escaping my mind right now. But it essentially is a credential that the training that's behind it really looks at all of the BREEAM programs together. It's not specific to, say, a particular rating system. It's more about the process and the understanding overall, and being able, it is quite closely tied to our new construction program rather than necessarily our in use. But it is available through our academy program, which I believe we have mostly, I believe it's online availability. So there is that possibility to take that up for those who are consulting. But what we generally encourage is that for organizations who want to consult, have consultancy, or even and that's all they want to do, we would still encourage them to take the exam and undertake the license, because that is the key designation specifically for being able to having taken that training and knowing the ins and outs of the program, because that's the only designation that we offer specific to the systems themselves. So we offer assessor licenses, assessor training and licenses for each of our rating programs. Those are really the designations. The BREEAM AP is probably just more the overarching qualification.
So it's just kind of dawning on me now that you are talking about, this entire presentation was about an existing buildings program. Actually, I was thinking the whole time that you only certified projects that were, past their performance stage. But it sounds like you also have a new construction program. Can you certify residential, single-family, multifamily with your new construction program as well?
You can, yeah. So at the moment in the U.S., we have, we actually applied the BREEAM International New Construction Program, but we've been working on a USA adaptation for that to ensure that it's specific to the market a little bit more. And we're looking to make some more announcements about that program in 2019. But the BREEAM International New Construction does apply here in the U.S. It can be used on residential, and that can be done.
Do you have, so there's some questions here about single family, and I don't know if they're specific to existing or new, but maybe you can answer it in general. But I mean, it sounds like on the existing you don't have the single family ready, but maybe on the new side, to what extent do you have participation in the single family market here in the U.S.?
Sure. So from the assessor qualification, there's nothing specific around single family homes. And the reason why is because the standard has been written so that it can encompass lots of different property types. And the assessor, the assessor's role is really about how to apply the standard, how to assess compliance of that standard for a project, whatever that might look like, and how to award the credits. So from an assessor point of view, there's no specific qualification for those. Now, for single-family homes in the U.S., so our stakeholder engagement program has been more focused on the multifamily market here, but it will be available to single-family home builders when it launches in 2019. But this is something where we're looking for more feedback specifically from this market and looking to ensure that is this something that there's finding value. The feedback that we've had previously has been that it's been questionable in some cases how valuable single-family home builders find these programs. But we are interested in BREEAM and use residential being used in all different types of homes, but mostly from the investor level.
So getting into the in-use side of things, if you're, I guess there's kind of two questions here. If it sounds like you're really relying on performance data, and if that's the case, then do you have systems that can sync up with utility companies so that you can just get that data automatically? And then second, if that is the case, then what is an on-site assessment required if you're able to just collect the actual utility data?
Sure. So the first thing is, we've had some conversations, particularly like with Energy Star on the commercial side. One of the things that we find is that data, it depends on where the data, how the data is split up. So a lot of times from an energy perspective, the number of meters and the areas that it's servicing are really based on what's the most efficient way to deliver electricity everywhere. So a lot of times there will be buildings that have a single meter and zero sub-metering. Well, that's really difficult when you have, let's say, a mixed-use building where you've got maybe a small amount of retail or something else, and then you have residential on top. So we don't have any direct connections with other systems that feed in the data. What we have done is set up our tool so that those other systems can be used to generate reports, and then it's a single data entry point. So for instance, on the commercial side, we're looking for an annual consumption figure for electricity, and it will be the same in BREEAM and use residential, where essentially what we're doing is we're just looking for that total overall figure. And to try and keep the data clean, we've kept the system separate for now. But with those systems, one of the key things about verification, for instance, on energy, is we look at bills, for example. So the bills are, really the primary evidence that says this is the consumption, this is what's been billed for the consumption, and that provides the backup for the consumption number that's provided. But one of the big things is when the assessor goes on site is to confirm, for example, that there aren't any additional meters that haven't been accounted for, that there aren't any, or let's say, less meters than have been talked about. It's all about verifying on site that that information is there and that the documentation is backed up. So, for example, on a bill, you'll often see, meter numbers. The assessor would then verify that those meters are indeed on site, that the numbers are matching up, and so on.
So do you have any, at least on the in-use side, do you have any prescriptive requirements and or energy modeling requirements or extra credit, I guess, for the program?
Not on the energy modeling. What we're looking at here is strictly performance data. So what is it, how is it performing now, and basing that solely on that information. One of the things that BREEAM and use is really great for, though, is a post-occupancy evaluation. So looking at the design and construction models that were undertaken and using BREEAM and use to verify that they are indeed being delivered or needing adjustment. So nothing specific on the modeling side, but we do encourage the use of the program to understand that performance and make make adjustments to improve that. As we know, a lot of times systems, the systems that are put into place can be top notch, but how they're operated really makes a difference. And so this is a great way of looking at to verify that performance is being achieved.
So, obviously anytime there's a green building system to be discussed, it, will, especially in the U.S., they'll get naturally, the question will always be, how does it compare to LEED? Where are the differences? And especially in the case of, operations or, the ongoing performance. And I can think of the LEED existing buildings operation maintenance now under V4.1, going beyond energy and water performance, which is similar, but also now looking at required air quality measurements, looking at transportation of the occupants, and looking at waste, and doing actually studies and surveys on all this. Will BREEAM and use be set up somewhat in the same way?
There is yes and no. So one of the things that we look at, again, because we provide a fair amount of flexibility in our program, they aren't, other than from an electricity standpoint to demonstrate that it's being captured, or energy and water. The rest of those are optional questions. But of course, the way that we do the balanced scorecard, strongly encourages, from a ratings perspective, strongly encourages the capture of that information. I think one of the things that makes, a couple of things that make BREEAM different from LEED is really, the starting point. LEED's whole premise right from the beginning was about awarding the highest performers for their program. So it's, leadership in energy and environmental design, right? So, it was all about the leadership of these programs, who are the best performers according to LEED based on that kind of, those kind of prescriptive outcomes. But BREEAM has really come at it from, all buildings needing to start, right from the base to say, okay, all buildings have the potential. They have constraints, but we need to move that forward. So we'll continue to keep the flexibility in our program to encourage all buildings to come through. But again, looking at how we can use the program to encourage those buildings to do a little bit more than maybe what they've done previously.
So obviously cost is always a question. I know you kind of hinted on it a little bit, but I don't know if you can get a little bit more into costs. Are there registration fees? Are there certification fees? What do they kind of look like? Are they, depending on how many buildings, how many units, how many square feet? And then I don't know if obviously you don't control the assessor market, but if you have a relative idea, on what assessors charge, to come in and do the reviews as well.
Sure. So the cost structure for residential is going to be announced when we run the final program, because it is going to be slightly different than our commercial. What I can say about our commercial, there are registration costs per asset. So the question will be what that is based on. Again, we'll announce it. So in our commercial program, it's a flat rate. We don't do it by square footage, for example. But that's the registration process. The certification costs, we generally charge, on our side, we charge a per part fee to the assessor for submission. But the actual assessment fees are set by the assessor organizations themselves. So in the commercial market, the charges are ranging between $5,000 to $8,000 all the way up to $30,000, depending on a lot of different factors. Generally, size of the building, the breadth of the rating, because the time that it takes to verify all the data, to walk the building, and so on. So we've really seen that really high price in buildings that are over 1 million square feet that are seeking a really high rating. But I mean, generally speaking, in that market, the costs overall from start to finish are generally between a third to half the cost of what LEED for existing buildings is running those buildings. And it's even better in portfolio situations where clients, are looking at a rolling program of certification, and so the per building cost can come down quite substantially. So we will be announcing the costs and the structure when we launch the program in early 2019, and our entire fee structure and all that will be published on our website.
All right, great. Well, we are a little over our time, and those are all the questions I see. So I guess before we wrap up, Brianna, where can people contact you or go to learn more information about the program?
Sure. So for BREEAM and Use Residential, the best thing to do is go ahead and contact me, see my details up there. So brianna.wheeler@breamerica.com. We also have a website, so www.breamusa.com, that provides some of the information about our commercial operations as well. But any of those things, do feel free to reach out to me, ask questions. I'll be happy to take them.
All right, Brianna. Well, I really appreciate you and your time, and thanks to BREEAM America for attending. And we're gonna head out now, but have a great rest of the week, everybody, and take care. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. Take care, everyone.